Hello and welcome to another video or another episode of Drawing Dragons with the Dragon Story. So in today's video, I figured I would just show you how I draw dragon eyes and kind of my thought behind dragon eyes. And later we can cover different types of dragon eyes. But if you look at it, my art, there's I kind of create a certain look or style to my dragons, and I'll kind of go over that. So once again, I'm on an iPad Pro with a pencil. I like using this glove a lot so my hand doesn't touch it. And for this, I am using the Vine charcoal brush. Same with the eraser, and it's under the charcoals. Just because that's my favorite. And so let's just focus on a dragon eye. And the shape of the eye has a lot to do with the type of dragon that you want to create, right? I'm just going to start with kind of a basic eye shape, right? And the top's usually a big swoop, and there's kind of a little bit of personality to the line underneath. And you always want to keep in mind the eyelids. Now, I can cover some of these basic eye shapes, but just like really quickly, if you want like a mean looking dragon, you can bring that eyebrow down like that. Or if you're going for a different, more sympathetic, or kind look, you can go with a different shape like this, more round. Maybe you want him a little more scary. You can always go with a little thin shape. And so we'll cover some of those later, but I just kind of wanted to show you my basic approach to dragon eyes. Now, there is an upper eyelid, but a lot of the times dragons or reptiles have that, it's like an eyebrow scale, I guess. I don't know what the official name is. That kind of protects and kind of comes out over the eye. Sometimes you have to think about it. Like if you're looking at it straight on, here's the eye. It's like a scale that kind of comes out and shields it. Like that. So you kind of want that in place, that in place. And I often look at human eyes to help with this design, because as the eyelid connects down here, just like in a human head, these lines, this shape kind of smooths out into this. And sometimes my texture lines will follow that direction. So that is something to keep in mind. I'll come back in. Just kind of add in a few lines to create the eyelid. Figure out that shape. And I kind of need to go back and do a more specific anatomical study of eyes. This is just kind of based on what I do with quick draws, adding the eyelid. And depending on the age of the dragon or the personality, you can obviously accentuate this. Maybe he's like an old looking dragon, or, but if he's young, you want to keep it kind of tight. And the eyeball is always a perfect sphere. It's technically like back in the skull. And so even though the eye kind of comes here, it has those circular edges. So let me make sure the bottom eyelid is defined really well. Let me just clean this up. And you do have to keep in mind the shape of the scale up here. So one of the things that I do with eyes is once I map this out, I specifically look to dogs or horses for inspiration on the eyes, specifically because that is why, like, I want people to feel more of a personal connection with the dragon. And so horses and dogs are animals that we tend to connect with, versus a reptile. That was really ugly. How reptiles have these, or even cat eyes can be kind of, it's like the eye of Sauron or something. And there are different ways to do this, but for my particular purpose, I focus on the horse or dog inspired eye. I'll actually increase the brush. So one of the things that I start with, when it's important to remember, like if a human eye has the iris and the pupil and then the white, dogs and horses are still the same thing. It's much wider. So sometimes I even leave a little bit of white right there. And because this is casting a shadow here, I start there and then just kind of work my way down, keeping it nice and soft. You have to be careful because if these texture lines get too heavy, that will mess up the illusion. And so a lot of times I start with that shadow, but I want this to overall be a circular sort of feeling. So I want to be careful that those lines, they're kind of in there already, but. And normally I'm drawing these a lot smaller. And so the texture lines don't show up as well. But you always want the top of the eye to be darker because it's in the shadows. Let me just make my brush size a lot bigger. And that's more accurate, yeah. Because now I'm not getting those texture lines from my brush strokes. Okay, so that's good. And I don't mind if my shading comes out a little bit. That's quite all right. In fact, I'll just go ahead and add some in. And so when I kind of get the basics in there, then I'll come back and then make sure this up here is much darker than down here. And sometimes if I lose my eyelid, I'll just come back in with my eraser and just kind of make sure I know exactly where that line is. Same thing with the bottom eyelid. Especially the bottom eyelid, because usually light is coming down, at this angle, and so then it picks up that highlight. So then the most important part is the highlight in the eye. So you need to know exactly where your light is coming from. So if the light is generally coming from this direction, you want your highlight to catch right there. I'm gonna make my brush a little bit bigger. And it's almost a pure white. Sorry, I think my iPad had a little bit delay. And so, I like giving it a little bit of a soft edge. And the light really depends on what is reflecting. Meaning, if your world has two suns, you might want more, or there could be actually reflected light or bounce light, or, if they're in a situation where there's like a whole bunch of firelight or something like that. You just have to think about the highlight reflecting the light sources in the image. So a lot of times I just stick with one, or sometimes it'll be like, 1.5. But what's important to remember is as the light is coming in, it catches on the outside of the eye right here, but then illuminates the inner side of the eyeball. And so then I'll always take my eraser and just lightly soften that up, because the light's entering the eyeball and kind of bouncing around. And one of the other things you can do is there's still a pupil within the dragon eye. And so you can go back in and tighten that up, even with that almost out of battery. Even with that bounce light. And you can even, ever so gently if you want some more like iris texture in there, iris, not Irish, you can just, add some of those just really soft texture lines. And then if you want to get really crazy, you know, the Irish, I can't even say that. Iris structure has little, I mean, there's depth to it, there's shape to it. And so sometimes the iris is picking up little bits and pieces of highlights from that light that's entering the eye. It just depends on how detailed you want to get. So even if I go in and add some of this, sometimes I'll just make sure that gets softened to help show that it's illuminating. And so then after that, you know, I'll just shade and texture the rest of the eye, paying careful attention to the direction that the skin and scales are going. I mean, and I won't go into a ton of detail on that. I just wanted it to look like a little bit better of a drawing in the end. By cleaning some of this up. And it's these highlights that are so much fun. You know, the light's just picking up the edges of each of this little texture. And it's these highlights that help give it the 3D space. So anyway, as you can see, especially if we zoom out, you know, it looks like a nice looking eye. So that's a really quick tutorial on how I approach dragon eyes. Sometimes I don't have as many highlights in here, but anyway, so there's my approach to dragon eyes. I'll continue this. I'll probably cover different eye shapes and kind of the emotion that each one conveys, as well as how we handle different colors of eyes and different types of irises. So different types of irises. It almost didn't sound like I said viruses. Anyway, so there you go. My dragon eye. Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune into my other videos. Thanks.